Well, good evening, everyone. Diane Young here on behalf of South Pacific Private, talking tonight about codependency and how it shows up in our relationships. And as we're waiting for others to log on, I'd like to acknowledge the Gayamagal people, part of the Eora Nation, as the traditional owners and custodians upon the land which we work and recover. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We work from this beautiful saltwater country, and it's an honour to be with you tonight. Codependency, this is the second part in a series. And last month we talked about codependency, and we really unpacked Pia Melody's model of developmental immaturity, and it's up on the YouTube channel for South Pacific, so if you haven't had a chance to have a listen to that, I would. I think it's a pretty extraordinary model that she put together, and I just unpacked it the way she unpacked it with me. So, in fact, Pia Melody was 26 years sober as a recovering person, and she in fact told me this her story herself. She reached a point in her recovery where she wasn't full of the joy of living, and she couldn't quite work out why. And this is many, many years ago, before South Pacific was even thought of. And she was working in the Meadows in Phoenix, Arizona, which still exists, and the Meadows still exists and has grown in the subsequent years. But she went home this particular night and she was feeling particularly low, and she thought to herself, I can't go on anymore. And she said to me that in that room, she was in her bedroom on her own, and she heard a voice say to her, you can't go anywhere, there's work to do. And there was no one there. And again with the head in the hands and the I can't go on, and same sort of voice, you can't go anywhere, you've got work to do. It meant nothing to her. But what happened is, over the ensuing years, she started to talk to the clients who were coming into the Meadows, many of whom who had quite a lot of recovery on board in various forms, and she started to put the model together. And her book, Facing Codependency, which is still available, actually unpacks the model in a lot of detail. And what she came to understand was, while she had addressed her addiction and alcoholism, she had never addressed her childhood trauma. Now, we're talking in an era where people talked about trauma, or they didn't actually talk about trauma, they talked about it in terms of war veterans, and they talked about them being shell-shocked, but nobody was talking then about how trauma that had happened to us between the ages of 0 to 18 then impacts us in our adult life. And so what she put together was this model with the help of those clients. And in fact, the program director came to see her. She was a nursing unit manager, and he said to her at the Meadows, this would have to be 40, 50 years ago, Pia, all the clients are talking to you, they're not going to group. And she said, well, that's because you're not talking to them about why they're here. And he said, what are you talking about? And she started to show him what she was putting together in terms of this model, and the fact that what we need as children is to be valued, to be allowed to be appropriately vulnerable, to allowed to be imperfect, to be dependent, appropriately dependent, and to be spontaneous and open. And if we're allowed to do those things, what we learn is self-esteem, healthy. We learn what boundaries are. We learn to live in reality. We have appropriate dependency needs, and we learn moderation. Now, last month we unpacked that in some detail, and so tonight I want to talk about codependency and how, if we're from a dysfunctional or traumatic family system, and we don't have any knowledge or awareness around that, we will grow up into adulthood with a couple of things happening. The first thing is we will become codependent, and that may look like caretaking, difficulty expressing needs. We might stay in unhealthy relationships, relationships that have healthy dynamics, and we often stay out of guilt or shame or abandonment. And in romantic relationships, we'll often fall into the love addiction or the love avoidance. Now, the Gottmans do a lot of work in this field with relationships, and they talk about the pursuer distancer. Peter just called it love addiction, love avoidance. The same. And families, if it's happening in families, and it often does, it'll often exhibit as, sort of emotional exhaustion, resentment, a loss of self that comes often through enmeshment, and they can be very hard to see, especially when they feel familiar and they feel consistent, and no one in the family is challenging anything. So tonight, talking about codependent relationships, we want to talk about how the codependency shows up. So I think the one thing I want to start by saying is that in codependent relationships, there's often a total loss of self, and you put everybody else first. There's no healthy relationship, There's no healthy relationship. You'll often feel frustrated, exhausted, unfulfilled. And what happens is, because when we're children, we get a message from our parents, a core belief, and it might be, I'm unworthy. Let's just say it is. You might think, I don't matter, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. But what you'll do is that'll transpire in your adult relationships. So you'll end up in relationships with people who reinforces the belief that you are unworthy, that you don't matter, that you don't count, that you don't belong, whatever your core belief is. One of the things we do at South Pacific is, when we're working in our groups, we'll often be talking about what is the core message you got when you're a child. Now, what I want to say to you at the beginning is, your parents, as a general rule, don't mean to harm you. Often it comes from their history with their parents, their history with the grandparents, and so it goes back. So it comes down the line. And I often say, and you will have heard me say it many times, this generation, our generation, this time in the world, we are given an opportunity to start to look at this in a healthy way. I'm sorry, I had a little bit of a sweet before I started and it's got caught in my throat. So when we are having these things reinforced to us, that we don't matter, that we're unworthy, we're actually then peddling a lot faster in our relationships to try and breathe, to try and have a sense of being of worth within the relationship. So when we want to break free from codependency, first of all, the first one is we've got to recognise we're codependent, and we've got to recognise where it came from. Now that might require that you go into South Pacific, or you do some work with a therapist who understands this work, and you can find out where it came from, with the overarching belief that mum and dad did not mean to harm me. They were doing the best they could. And I can count on one hand the amount of people that I've worked with where the parent actually meant to harm the child. Now, some other therapists may have a different stat on that, but that's my experience. As a general rule, the parents aren't trying to harm the child. So let's talk about what a telltale sign of a codependent relationship might look like, because I want you to get clear about this. You're overly concerned about what the other person's thinking, doing or feeling. You want to fix or rescue them from their problems, whether they're asking you to or not, just quietly. And you don't worry, and you worry that if you don't take care of them, something bad's going to happen, or they're going to leave you. Codependents often have a terror of being left or abandoned, or a terror of being smothered. It's one or the other usually. And it can flip-flop depending on how you were parented. Second thing is, your relationship often might be one-sided. So one person's doing the heavy lifting, the hard work, the responsible one, and the other one's allowed to be irresponsible and avoid consequences of their actions. And the person who's doing the heavy lifting will enable the person who's making poor choices, will enable them. And ultimately they get very resentful because they're doing the heavy lifting and the other person's not taking any notice of that. The third thing is you'll sacrifice yourself to make the other person happy. And this can include anything from your health, your time, energy, money, values, goals, friendships. Your life will revolve around the other person, and everything's about making them happy, taking care of them, or doing what they want to do. And this is often interesting, because if you're in a relationship like this, what you'll find is if the relationship comes to an end, you're totally lost. You don't know who you are anymore. And it can be terrifying. This is when you're absolutely in total love addiction, but I'll come to that. You walk on eggshells around the other person. There's certain things you're afraid to do or say. You don't want to displease them, and you don't want them to get angry. So everything about you is giving up who you are for the other. You don't express opinions, you don't share your feelings, you don't ask for what you want. And as a general rule, my experience of codependents is most of the time they have no idea what they want. They think they know, and they have no idea what they need. And I'll often say to clients, write down a list for me of what you need in your life versus what you want. And I start group and say, have you got any needs for the day? You know, have you got any needs that you want me to take care of, or try the group to take care of? And people would look at me like, I don't even know what I need. It's like we have no idea. We're never taught the difference between a need and a want. And it's an interesting exercise sometimes to do that. So if you're frightened of the other person, frightened around that you walk on eggshells, you'll actually say yes to things you really want to say no to. So you say yes when you mean no. You do anything to avoid conflict. And you sacrifice your goals and your values for the other person. Not healthy. None of this is healthy. You can actually act like a martyr and taking care of everyone. But then get resentful when no one helps you or seems to care for you. Mind you, you won't be asking for anyone to help you, and you won't be asking for anyone to care for you. And again, it comes back to the needs and wants. It's like if you don't know what you need or want, you can't ask for it. But what will happen is you'll get resentful when others don't show up for you. It's like, I did all this for you, nobody asked you, but you'll get resentful about it. Fascinating how we set ourselves up, you know. You need to fix or rescue, and you can become very controlling. Now, you'll often wrap that up as being organised. You'll often wrap it up as, I've got to take care of it because no one else will. Again, the martyr seeps in, and you attempt to control the other person's behaviour through criticising, nagging, ultimatums, or giving unsolicited advice. Codependents are fabulous at giving unsolicited advice, do you know? You will continue the relationship with the person repeatedly after they've repeatedly hurt you, either physically, emotionally, financially, or even sexually, like sex addiction. And again, it comes back to the loss of self. I think I made it pretty clear you spend a lot of time taking care of other people rather than taking care of yourself. And when you do something for yourself, like you try and rest or do a hobby or something, you'll feel guilty or selfish. So you cut yourself no break at all. You're afraid of being rejected, criticised or abandoned. I'm sure you're also afraid of being, sort of smothered or controlled. And there's no There's no definitive test or checklist for codependency, but those things I've just mentioned give you an idea of what it looks like and what it feels like. If you're in a codependent relationship, you'll probably identify with some of what I've said, and you'll recognise all or some of what I've said. And it's important for any codependent person who's in those settings and who can recognise it to be very clear about it, because until we get to that point, we're not in a position to change anything. So when we're talking about coming into recovery from codependency, I want to go back to the model a bit because I think it's very clear. The first thing we need to look at is they're rooted in relationships. Codependency plays out in relationships, but it's rooted in how you feel about yourself. And since you're the only one that can change you, not others, changing codependent relationship patterns starts with modifying how you think and feel and treat yourself. Now, this is really difficult for codependent people. I had a client in here just a little while ago, and I was saying to her, I'd like you to think about the possibility of doing some things for yourself that are joyful. Doesn't matter what it is. Anything. Whatever makes you happy, sing in a choir, get your bike license, garden, I don't know, whatever. Knit, doesn't matter. Sew, read, go out with friends, see a movie, whatever it is. And the hardest part for her is to actually put herself first. And it's palpable. When given the opportunity to do something for yourself first, it feels to her like she's being selfish. And this woman's in her 50s. She's spent her entire life looking after everybody else, to the point where she's depleted and alone. So this is where her work is. So it's how you treat yourself. So the first thing we want to talk about is increasing your self-worth. So your self-esteem. So we're not going to sit in less than, we're not going to sit in better than. Coming back to the model, it's the core component of codependency. So often codependents feel like there's something wrong with them, so they constantly seek validation. They're afraid of rejection, and they do things to try and prove their worth. It sets them up to be caretakers. They need to be needed, and they have a purpose. And we tend to do this at our own expense. Now, the interesting thing is that I'll often talk to people about, this terrible need to be needed. It's a setup. And a friend of mine always says, if you don't deal with the setup, you'll be upset. And that's right. So if we're actually doing for others, always, whether they ask us or not, and often they don't, so that we get validation from them, we're setting ourselves up to end up being resentful because we're not getting the validation back from the people. I think that clearly what we need to be able to do is learn to esteem ourselves from within. Now that's again what a functional adult would do. But the question about esteeming yourself within, how do you esteem yourself within if you don't actually feel like you're worth anything? We have to start doing esteemable acts for ourselves first. And it could be a small thing first, just a small thing. Maybe going for a coffee just on your own and having an hour by yourself. I don't know what it is, but you'll know what it is. Could I possibly allow myself to do that thing, whatever it is? We have to do esteemable acts. And it doesn't matter how small it might seem to you. Start somewhere. Because if we're actually consistently focusing on what everybody else needs and not looking after ourselves, we just go in the ever-decreasing cycle. Then we're never going to get out of it. So we have to do the thing that we're frightened of, which is step out and put ourselves first. And I would say to clients at South Pacific, it's not about putting yourself first. It's not about being selfish. It's about putting yourself first in terms of what you need to be the best version of yourself, not about anybody else. We need to start acknowledging and validating our feelings. How I feel today. What is that? What do I feel? Am I happy, sad? Do I feel a bit low? Do I feel some shame? Am I joyful? You know, what is the feeling? And we can have concurrent feelings. We can feel angry and be calm. You know, crazy. We can be upset and grateful. You know, so there's a lot of things that we can hold together. So we need to own our feelings and treat ourselves with compassion, which is what codependents never do, by the way. They're always very hard on themselves. And they're not easy, but we take small, intentional actions toward the goal, such as saying something kind to ourselves. The second thing I want you to talk about is setting a boundary. Now, you know the drill. Internal boundary from your heart to your abdomen protects your truth, your heart. It's the part of you that if you have an internal boundary, invisible force field, it protects your heart. If someone says something nasty to you, it's likely to bounce off. I have a solid internal boundary. So if someone says something nasty to me, I don't take it on. It's like I don't take it on as a definite. I think, oh, okay, is there value in that? Is it true, what they're saying about me? Is it not true, or is it questionable? And if it's questionable, then I go to a friend, a trusted friend, maybe a therapist, I don't know, and I check it out with them. So I have my internal boundary, I have my external boundary, and what the other thing the internal boundary does is it prevents me from coming out and abusing you, because it actually acts as a filter. Should I say that? Maybe not. So, and you know, whatever higher power you might have, and I don't care what that is, but I think it's always helpful to have some sort of sense of creative intelligence, the universe, or something that's bigger than us. Otherwise we live in a lot of arrogance and it's all up to us, and there's nothing, you know, there's no meaning and purpose to anything. So, internal boundary and external boundary, very, very important. Peter used to say, if you can get on top of your self-esteem and boundaries, you're more than halfway there to recovery from codependency. And there's another 5 aspects of the values of a child that we deal with in that book and in the model. So self-esteem and boundaries are very, very significant. So I want you to start to get to know yourself better, to not be so wrapped up in people-pleasing and caretaking of others. Because when we do that, we're disconnected from ourselves. And if we're disconnected from ourselves, we've got no chance of actually getting into recovery from this. We'll no longer know what we feel, because we will have suppressed our feelings for so long we just don't even feel them. We'll be numb. We don't pursue anything that makes us happy, no goals, no hobbies, because we give up all our time and energy doing what other people are interested in. So you may want to get reacquainted with yourself by asking yourself, what do I like to do? What do I like to spend my time on? What are my goals? What can I do for myself to feel better? How do I encourage you to pick the one thing you can do for yourself and start today? What's the one thing? And it can be something simple. Putting yourself on the to-do list is an important part of bringing your life back into balance and health. It gives you meaning and purpose and connects you with yourself. And if you're connected with yourself, you can connect with others. And I want you just to let go just a little bit. You know, we need to have spiritual connection. We need to be connected with ourselves. You know, how do we end up being intimate with anybody if we can't be intimate with ourselves? You know, it's that great word, intimacy, isn't it? Into me I see. It's like when I let you in, you see who I am. But I'm not going to let you in to see who I am unless I like who I am, because I'll be ashamed of who I am, and I live with that shame. And some of that shame comes from my history, which we need to sort out therapeutically. Some of it comes from addiction, again, which we need to sort out initially, detoxing, and then taking some time to address our addiction, maybe through 12-step recovery, spiritual connection with ourselves. You find that most addicts are looking for some sort of spiritual connection. They're looking for the spirit in the bottle, in the drug, in some sort of connection in the gambling, whatever it is, in the sex. And what they need is a spiritual connection with themselves, and that's the hardest work you'll ever do in your life, I can tell you. So the concept of detaching is central to codependency recovery. When we detach from others, we can put some emotional and physical space between ourselves and others. It doesn't mean abandoning others and ending relationships. Did you hear that? And it's not selfish or unloving. Detaching means you stop obsessing about what others are doing or not doing, their problems, their feelings, and so forth. It gives you room to be yourself and take care of yourself. And my experience is that if I take care of myself, if I'm settled in myself, I am absolutely able to be of service to the people in my life, whatever that looks like, whether it's my family, whether it's my work, whether it's my friendships, whether it's 12-step community, whether it's recovery people. I'm actually able to be there for others because I'm boundaried, because I know where I begin and end and you begin and end, and we can meet together. You know, it's like the relationships are not like this. The two people going along, and you put in and I put in. That makes the third energy, which is the relationship. And if we're both putting in, then we can be healthy about it. Now, detaching includes things like leaving a situation if you're uncomfortable or you feel unsafe, considering your own needs and feelings first, choosing not to enable or engage in dangerous behaviours or allow anybody else to, listening rather than trying to solve or fix problems. So when someone's telling you something, someone rings me, my daughter rings me and asks me a whole lot of stuff. I said, do you want me to listen to you? She's an adult woman now, so I'm careful. Do you want me to listen to you or do you want my advice? She'll often say, no, I just want you to listen. Okay, fine, fire away. And she'll download, okay. And then when she finishes, she'll often say, actually, I do want to know what you think. But because I've given her space, she can take the space. And I don't have to give an opinion on everything, because I don't know everything. Don't nag and I don't criticise. If I ask someone to do something once and they don't do it, I'll ask it a second time. If they don't do it a second time, they're not going to do it. Forget it. Anything past 2's nagging. Don't even bother. And I set boundaries. Now, I'm kind of running out of time. I wanted to talk about how it shows up in our intimate relationships. I haven't quite got there yet. I do want to say, though, that we might cover that in our next one, perhaps, and that is how those childhood dysfunctional and traumatic events impact us to become codependent people. We'll either be codependent and or addicts, or both. We have to be in recovery about both. The codependency is therapeutic. The addiction has some therapeutic initially, and also will needs to be in 12-step recovery, I believe, is my belief, and in abstinence. You can do 2 recoveries and you can come together as one person. And the other thing I want to talk to you about next time, I think, is how those codependent impacts that we have turn up in our intimate relationships, in that love addiction, love avoidance cycle. And that can be very, very painful for many people. I just want you to take a minute. Can I just take a minute, because I'm conscious of time? I just want to have a look at, hello Lynette, how are you? Nice to hear from you. And Luke, wow, nice to hear from you down in the beautiful cold country down there, I think. Emma, in a codependent relationship, you can both flip-flop on your position during phases. Say if you had a similar bringing up. Yes, I believe that in a codependent relationship, you can become both. And this is what I was talking about, you can come into the avoidance and you can come into the addiction. You can do both. Or, as I said, the Gottmans would say, the pursuer distancer. So you can play both roles. I actually think what happens to us is, as children who are in dysfunctional and abused homes, we will be in such pain that we will learn as we go through our teen years and we start acting out of the adaptions and the defence mechanisms, we'll actually start to live from our head, which is the adapted adult self, which is what Pia calls it. Whereas the wounded child is in the feelings in the body. This is painful. If we live from this space, we're controlling, anti-dependent, we're good, perfect, better than, invulnerable. If we're living from the wounded part, we will be less than, too vulnerable, bad, rebellious, too dependent, and out of control. So we're flip-flopping between both, and that shows up in our adult relationships and our intimate relationships. So I'm sorry that I haven't gotten to that tonight. Thank you, Linky. Nice to hear from you. And thank you everyone else who's logged on tonight. I appreciate it very much. And it's a fascinating topic and a fascinating subject. Recovery is possible. If you have any concerns, there's self-assessments you can do on the South Pacific website. They're anonymous. You can log on and do them. You can ring South Pacific tomorrow if you want to have a conversation with them about possibility of admission. And if you're feeling that there's anything else that you want to discuss with them, you can probably talk about it. So if you're in any sort of pain around your relationships and codependency, if you're in any sort of pain around addiction and you're not sure, and that can be across the board addiction, I'd suggest you reach out tomorrow and have a conversation with someone. You don't have to do it alone. Recovery can be a joyful and wonderful thing. I'm great evidence of that, and I want to thank you for logging on tonight. So thank you very much. Stay safe, and I shall see you next month.